We like to think we are the undisputed authors of our daily lives. We believe our decisions, our corporate strategies, our relationship choices are made by logical adult minds.
But what if we are actually being guided by a silent scriptwriter? What if the intense reactions we feel today, the sudden flare of defensive anger, the urge to withdraw, or the phantom weight of inadequacy are the actual voices of our smaller selves, begging to be heard?
Our guest today is an international titan in the field of human psychology. She's a TSTA in psychotherapy, the founder of Seed TLC, and a past president of the ITAA. She's globally renowned for her capacity to map the human unconscious and guide people through the deepest layers of self-acceptance.
On the OK Air, we trace origins to find clarity. Today, we turn our lens to the roots of healing, the architecture of the unconscious, and the profound wisdom of staying in the mess. I am Eric Lee James.
And I'm Piyush Dikshit. Join us for a masterclass in relational depth now. Chitra Ravi, a genuine honor to have you in the air with us today. Welcome.
Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah. Chitra, you often say healing takes place when we get in touch with our pains and deeply feel for the smaller selves within us. For someone completely new to transaction analysis, the word smaller selves sounds poetic, but for advanced practitioners, it points to the profound structural architecture of the child ego state. What was the origin of this realization in your own life? Before you were an international president, before you were a TSTA, when was the first time you had to stop and tend to a smaller self within Chitra?
Oh, it's a wonderful question. I'm taken back to the year 2000 when I did my TA 101 with PK Saru. And I walked into the 101 thinking I was looking for concepts and I was looking for deeper aspects about personality that I could take to my corporate work. And I was a trainer. I was a person who did a lot of programs for various corporates. And I was really searching for something that would give me some access to something deeper. But the 2 days of 101 itself, I got in touch with something that was a very, very younger part of myself, maybe around the 5th standard. And and that I think was a genesis of something so deep and hurtful about a teacher who we usually hold in good stead, really having punished me in such a harsh manner. I felt a deep sense of not being a part of my own peer group for the period of time through that punishment. And I remember that I didn't want to come to class, and I somehow found a way to put away that awful experience and maybe banish it from my memory systems and live life actually being very strong. And the next year, I had this fantastic nun who really nurtured and protected me. And that's what I wanted to hold as achievement was such an important part of showing up in the world. And that really supported me in corporates. But that little self got so almost banished away from my memory system till it resurfaced. Yeah.
No, thanks for that, Chitra. Also looking at the seeds of Seed TLC, which is therapy learning coaching. So when a seed is buried in the soil, it goes through an intense, chaotic process of breaking apart before anything grows. So in high stakes leadership situations and in the corporate, people are terrified of that dark room phase. How did your own relationship with your vulnerability change as you stepped into global leadership positions?
It's such an important question because I think as leaders, often what I have noticed in myself and in others, but not so much in myself, because by the time I started doing plenty of corporate work, I was already transitioning through the TA journey, discovering those deep aspects of myself. But what I do encounter, what you talked about, Piyush, in corporates, often leaders need to show up as folks who really can manage, who can do spectacular work, live up to toxic and difficult situations, swallow their feelings, and put up the strong facade of being fantastic. They're all the time looked at, awarded, and rewarded, and given a lot of compliments for these kind of attributes they bring to the table. So when I am actually working in coaching, especially with corporates or even facilitating, what I coin as self in leadership as a program that I run for some corporates, I think it is really to get in touch with those parts of self, which then, when they're vulnerable, then the whole atmosphere in that particular team changes. To be able to show up as being real, to be able to actually see people and the human element as real. I'm so glad that you talk about the human OS, which really denotes that operating system or that element are aspects that the leadership can invite and also can show up. And then that becomes an atmosphere of engagement rather than being stoic and being false in some ways, toxic and starched. Yeah.
And Chitra, just on that program alone that you spoke about, any memory of anybody coming back to you and saying they are so used to being stroked a certain style in their organization, and suddenly when they discover a lot of things and then they come back and there is a change that they anticipate and their people around them change? Any stories that come to your
Oh,
top?
absolutely. Recently itself, I worked with a group of the top leaders of a particular organization, and it was one particular group that we were working with, one of the business groups, HR professionals. And they were talking about how this program offered them capacity to become real, to become something that which they did not have any space for. For instance, when they had their counterparts and the business counterparts coming up to them saying, oh, HR, and scoffing and saying things which often happen in organizations, in some organizations. They really swallow and then they laugh it off and then they put up with this and really feel the only space they have to voice out all of this is in their own meetings. And in the course of the work, what actually came alive was then how does that impact those business leaders when they don't get access to what the other feels or the other experiences? And how can that capacity start shifting? Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is when they assert themselves and when they're different with the business leaders, it changes that dynamic, and then for more things can happen.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't really only focus on the corporate. I say even in life. So for instance, with your son or your daughter, especially the ones who are really rebellious, how can we be natural and real and not massage their egos and not shy away from saying what is really, really important to be named or said? It's not an easy thing to do at all, I'm sure. You all also know about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Chitra, very, very interesting perspective. So I'm excited to push a little bit more into the deep end for our advanced listeners. You're widely celebrated for your work on unconscious processes and the therapeutic dyad. In TA, we map the ego states cleanly on a whiteboard. But when two human beings step into a room, those circles bleed into each other. You talk a lot about the unspoken resonance between a practitioner and a client. When you're sitting in a supervision group or a therapeutic session, how do you visually or internally track where the client's unconscious ends and your own begins? What does that internal boundary feel like?
Oh, this is an ocean that I can talk about Eric, but I'll be brief. I think it's one of the most powerful parts of the work that we do as therapists, and especially the TA circles and using the language of transactional analysis. I'm going to go into the therapeutic pair first. The need often for the therapist is to do something, to quickly take the pain away from the client. That's what most psychologists or many people who enter our groups are taught. How can you quickly rush in and intervene? On the other hand, when you look at the relational field, there is something much more happening between the pair than what is the content or what is being said, what is being presented. Often it is about how they need some help and support with a million things. But what is so powerful is for the therapist to be aware of what's happening at the unconscious level, which Byrne even talks about in the form of ulteriors, and how easily that concept can actually give space for the therapist to just hold back and see what's at the transferential level. What am I being pulled to actually act on? And we use a word hooked. What am I being hooked to actually rush in and do? And to be able to sometimes even name that. I'm aware that I'm being pulled to do this, and yet can I withhold myself and see what would happen if I don't? And something really transforms in the therapeutic space. And similarly in supervision, I'm often called to do something and I just sometimes just smile and I say, okay, we're both aware that there's something that's happening here. And the supervisor has the shy grin and the smile and say, ah, now I'm seeing that's just that response actually is sufficient for the supervisor to say, oh God, something is really formed for me. And that part of the unconscious is so precious that, it can only manifest in relationships. Yeah.
So it's not always obvious. And what I heard you is you choose whether to hold back or not based on what happens. Yeah.
And based on the level of the client as well as the level of the supervisee, sometimes they need for us to step in, whether it's a client or a practitioner in supervision. And it's not one size fits all kind of a thing, but it is there. It is available for us to see what can happen.
So for our new listeners, we have these unconscious, maybe blind spots that surface, and we project them onto our partners, probably all the time with leaders, with colleagues. So why are we so often attracted to the same environments or people that trigger our deepest wounds? Maybe it isn't always pleasant, this, right? So what is the unconscious trying to get through this repetition? What are we aiming for?
It's a wonderful question, Piyush. And really, Rick Byrne, I think we need to be grateful for him for founding TA, Transactional Analysis. Because I think what he put together in those 1949 to 1970, I think is the work of simplifying transactional analysis, the complex constructs of the unconscious into simple aspects of psychology through transactional analysis. So I think when you're looking at patterns, and that's what we are all the time, even in psychology, if the training is of a psychologist or a psychotherapist is for seeing what patterns are emerging in the therapeutic or even in groups that we hold, it's a microcosm of what happens outside. And therefore, we're looking at these patterns, and these form things that unconsciously get projected, like what you said, into any space. And then you become the recipient of that. And especially, and I'm sure you guys also who are PTSDs would realize that we are all recipients of the projections. And often you become the perpetrator, you become all of this. Or the group becomes, some group members become those participants in their story. So there's a constant need to project this because it is safe, because that's the only way the child survived, by forming these patterns. And so, yeah, these patterns keep emerging, and that becomes such a precious and important source of learning, however, with safety. It's not to cause shame in the other, but invariably we may have someone feeling a little bit of shame. Sometimes that also supports, going through that bit once more in order to heal. I hope I've answered the question. Yeah.
So there is need for courage, or I don't know, bravery to stay with that discomfort when it comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And what I also like what you mentioned, Chitra, was the word shame. It's such a useful feeling. And that's what you mentioned right now. Instead of pushing it away. And if it shows up, it gives you a lot of meaning. And
Yeah.
there is a lot of learning from that as well.
Yeah. And before the client leaves the therapeutic dyad or a member of the group leaving the group, it's important those processes are attended to. Otherwise, they can continue. The residual effect can be quite traumatizing for the person who's gone through that shame. But the group also forms a very supportive space just to hold the space for that to happen. Yeah.
Right.